Okay, welcome back everyone. This is the next of our panel discussions. This one is Net Zero TV. On the panel, we have, on my immediate right, we have Gemma Butler, who's the Chief Community Officer at WeAre8. Anyone who was in here yesterday will know all about WeAre8 and has probably downloaded it already.
Yes.
Quite possibly. In the centre here, we have Durai, who's Head of Procurement, Group Head of Procurement, sorry. I demoted you. Group Head of Procurement, Corporate at Sky Group. And on the far side, we have Danielle, Mulder, Group Director of Sustainability at the BBC. So a warm welcome to all of them, please. Thank you. So we are discussing net zero in TV. The obvious question to start with for all of you is, what does net zero in broadcasting actually look like? And I'll start with you, Danielle. What does it look like?
Well, it looks like, essentially you've got to take ownership as a sort of responsible business or responsible broadcaster of your impact and your emissions. So we kind of focus on four things. We take responsibility for what we call our direct operational emissions, or our scope 1 and 2. Secondly, we take responsibility for all of our content, which we've signed up for a climate content pledge. So we're integrating the latest climate science along with all the other broadcasters. Actually, we signed up for this at COP26 with 12 broadcasters to seriously integrate climate science, and I'm happy to talk about it a little bit if we go there, across all of our genres and our climate and our content. Thirdly, we are decarbonising our supply chain as well. So we're actively engaging our key suppliers and saying, guys, we're serious about net zero. We're so serious that we've adopted science-based targets. We'd like you to adopt science-based targets too and come with us on this journey. And so we're working with the CDP supply chain solution to do that. And then the fourth thing is about being a leader, going way beyond compliance and driving industry change. So we've got a house in order in terms of all the standards and disclosure requirements, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, from TCFD to CDP to SBTs and all the other acronyms that we have to keep ahead of, even TNFD now as well. And we do integrate nature into this strategy, by the way. But we want to go beyond that. We want to be a lighthouse. We need to inform, educate and inspire on this topic. And that's why I joined the BBC. I'm hugely privileged to work at the BBC because we reach about 500 million people globally. So we need to tell them the truth, and we need to get everybody to come with us.
Pat?
Well, yes, exactly what Danielle said, really. But for Sky, so I think Sky have made the commitment to be net carbon zero by 2030 in all of our operations, so with our suppliers and our customers. So first, we've measured our carbon using the sort of science-based targets. That's all been signed off. We're now actually looking at how we actively reduce that. We're, in a way, our scopes 1s and 2s are quite low because as part of the reason I'm here is from a procurement perspective, we have to do a lot of the going out and doing the finding of the sourcing and working with the suppliers and making sure all of that happens. So we've buy renewable energy. We've bought it for a long time. We've always been carbon neutral. What we are now looking at is actively how we go through all of our operations and drive down the carbon that we're emitting, right? So there is that difference and making sure people understand that, as well as that taking on the role of a broadcaster. And what is the role of a broadcaster in driving that net zero agenda and inspiring people and our suppliers as well as our customers to make this change. It is not something that's going to happen overnight, and it's something that we all have to work towards. But by acting as a sort of a leader where we can start to signpost some of that to help our supply base move that forward, that's something that we're really passionate about. And also what's really interesting is we want to push this agenda across our business. So all of our colleagues, there's hundreds of my colleagues across our business in every different part of Sky, working on this agenda. So that's why it's not just our sustainability folks, it's everyone, and we're all passionate about it. So that's part of what we want to talk about, is how you push that in through a company and how we then sell that out as well.
Because Gemma, as a newer player in the sort of social field, yes, I guess it's a different starting point for you.
Yes, and I think it's, this is around the content and the communications, and as Danielle was saying, it's about motivating and inspiring people and driving that sort of that message and the education and that collective action out there, because it's without collective action, without collaboration, without people knowing about, sustainability is a complex issue, without people knowing what's going on and where to start and how to take that forward, then, the message is lost. It's about telling a different story now. So I think from the communications and content perspective, it plays such an important role in what we put out there nowadays.
Because I think that the context now is different. Pre-COVID, from a broadcasting point of view, everyone thought the consumer expected a certain thing. Everything has to be perfect. Everything has to be immaculate. There needs to be a proper camera there. Do you feel that since COVID and people have become maybe more willing to watch something that was recorded on Zoom or a mobile or something like that, which obviously has a different set of implications when it comes to sustainability? Do you feel that needle's moved at all?
Yeah, and I think we had teams of people that couldn't travel, during that period. Pretty challenging for news, because we can't use clever graphics and CGI when you're reporting on the Ukraine war, for example. You do need to physically have people there reporting, but that activated sort of local production teams and local news teams more than ever has done before, which is real positive. And also Sport did a really good job, because they set up a sort of virtual production studio in Salford in Manchester. And so we reported against the Tokyo Games, and then the Winter Games, the Beijing Games, and then more recently the Munich European Championships as well, remotely, as much as possible. So we're starting to really focus and on who's going to these events, major events. Do they need to physically go there? Can we use virtual production methods as much as possible? But I am starting to see a little bit of creep back, towards against the Qatar Games. It's the World Cup. I am starting to sort of say, really, guys, do that many people need to go to Qatar? Because not only is there an implication on business travel to these events, but in places like Qatar, for example, and sorry to call them out, but their footprint per person is 7 times higher than it is here in the UK. So there's an impact when you're actually in that country as well, depending on their intensity of their grid. So yeah, it's something we focus on. COVID did help, but we're going to watch it doesn't creep back.
Pat, have you noticed that at all post-COVID? Any kind of changes? Because the world seems rather different now.
No, I'm just thinking about that. It's an interesting one. I think possibly, I don't think so. And I think we were always quite lean anyway in how we managed our productions. We've been doing this before COVID. COVID wasn't the instigator of that. We've been trying to push, we've been pushing a zero, removing single-use plastic from our operation, for example. So we've been doing all of this before, and we don't tend to have these large operations moving around, but we do. Live sport is what Sky is built on, right? So it is really important to us. We want to continue to keep that quality, but trying to make sure that we're reducing the carbon footprint of that, right? So what are we doing about our AB vans? What are we doing about that? It's all of that kind of operational stuff that you don't necessarily see, and making sure.
Because how difficult is it to find those wins? Because if you think about a broadcast operation, you're picturing all the trucks parked outside, you're seeing all the cables, you're thinking all the miles people are driving.
Absolutely.
How tough is it to find those wins?
It's tough because if you think we've tried to be decarbonising since for a long time. So looking at how we manage things like OB vans and generators, for example. So what can we do about making those more like solar and batteries, and what can we do around hydrogen? It's a very interesting topic, hydrogen. But it's those kinds of ideas that we want to bring to the fore, so it doesn't impact the end customer. What they see. They want to see. Live sport needs to have that HD, that 4K experience. We want it to still be that premium experience. It doesn't have to have that huge carbon footprint behind it. And how do you take out the carbon from the operation? And also, like you say, exactly with live news and having to buy flak jackets and the armoured cars in Ukraine, that was an interesting point when we had the same for news, the risk assessments. We still sent our journalists abroad. We still did all of that. And but I think what we are doing is really trying to make it so you don't see it. It shouldn't make a difference, and it shouldn't reduce quality. We want it to still be a really quality product that is put out there.
Because us viewers are very discerning, aren't we? We're very quick to complain if things aren't of the same standard. One thing a couple of you have sort of touched on is the responsibility of broadcasters, whether it's through traditional media or social media, to actually, I think one of you used the expression of being a lighthouse.
Yeah.
How important do you all feel that is? Because broadcasters are the mouthpiece a lot of the time.
I think from a social media perspective, WeAre8 is a platform that's free from hate. It's the people's platform, and we want to make social media a better, kinder place. You know, it's no secret there's a lot of disinformation out there, certainly around climate, that's spread across social media. So, you know, we're really focusing on how do you make social media a better, kinder place, where people aren't censored, where disinformation is reduced, and we're doing a lot of work around that. So I think, you know, we have a massive responsibility to effectively, you know, ensure that the people are informed in the right way, so that people can make the better decisions. They have a better understanding, because again, if we let all the misinformation, you know, run wild, then it's going to stop the progress. And quite frankly, we haven't got time. You know, the clock ticked just to 6 years. We have to pull that back, and we have to work together. Government have to work together, businesses, people, everybody has a role to play in this. And that's something that we're really, really championing and pushing in that space, which is, you know, but also we've got to make that space a trust space. You talked about transparency, didn't you? And trust. Without that, you know, people aren't going to listen, and people are being hit by information and messages all day, every day. So how do you break through that noise and create a place where people, you know, want to be?
Because that noise is absolutely key to my next question, because people are incredibly quick to criticise the media, in inverted commas, for whatever it is. How important is it that people maybe understand the work's going on? Because often you can't do right for doing wrong, really.
In what way do you mean? In
terms that people will often criticise, you know, the media agenda, if you like. You know, anything that the media does will be piled onto on Twitter. Right. So if you see what I mean, how important is it that the truth actually breaks through of the work that's going on, and it's not just greenwashing, it's actual tangible benefits that are being made?
Having a very clear agenda on that, right? Yes. I think Sky has made very clear commitments publicly around, you know, everything that we put out is news. We want to be the most trusted news source in the country and in the world, right? So part of that is we are reporting the facts, and we will always report the facts. And that's it. I don't think you can get bogged down by the noise of social media and the noise of disinformation on Twitter and you know, active disinformation from everywhere else. But at the end of the day, that is our responsibility, and that is a responsibility we take very seriously. And I think everybody can criticise it, but I don't think the general public distrust the media to that extent.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely sort of moved on helpfully. It's not perceived to be an impartiality issue. Climate change is here. It's fact. It's scientifically. The argument about, you know, human-induced climate change, that's gone. I mean, the facts are clearly in. So we're not in a difficult position at the BBC to talk to this now. You know, we're actually in the situation, sadly, that we're really talking about, you know, how long have we got and what is the impact and consequence going to be. You know, we don't have debates about what we can and can't say on this topic, because we're very much led, you know, by the science. So it is about communicating that science in a simple and informed way that everybody can understand it. And it's about moving the dial up to how do we hold business and government to account on this topic, because we need the change to happen and need it to happen quickly. So yeah, no, it's and in terms of do we measure it? Yeah, we do. We measure it. We measure how many people we reach. I mean, we have a whole audiences team. I'm sure Sky does too. But you know, who's watching our programs, when they watch it, how many clicks we get. And you know, I've been, you know, quite surprised how sophisticated it is actually in terms of what we know about our audiences and their behaviours and what they're watching, and so how to integrate into explicit content. So Natural History Unit, as with the team up in Bristol yesterday, we're about to launch Frozen Planet 2. We will have all the stats on who has watched that programme and how many households it's reached on linear TV, but also on our digital iPlayer platform and also online as well. And we're taking all of that content globally now. So, you know, in terms of explicit content, we can track that quite neatly in terms of age group, socioeconomic breakdown as well, who's watched it. Then we're building it in implicitly into all of our genres I touched on. It's actually quite important to normalise it. That's the role of the media. So when you watch EastEnders, for example, you'll see an EV being charged or whizzing around in the background, and you'll see people talking about waste or the energy crisis. It will start to become part of the vernacular and the conversation.
It does normalise it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it normalises it so that we can all feel comfortable with it and talk about it. And, we do this on other topics as well, sort of mental health and diversity as well. So, the more that people see this normalised on their screens, that's the power of the media. The more that we can actually engender, positive change on this topic.
I think one of the things that probably we haven't done as well, which is hopefully now improving as you talk about positive changes, to talk about the progress that's being made. So often we know there's a big headline about something or a pledge or a target's released, but then the progress isn't shouted about along the way. And I think that progress drives hope, and that hope drives action, and then together we can start making progress towards a more sustainable future.
It's also, just very quickly, is about making editorial choices, right? So we have a daily climate show that we have on our Sky News, where we actually report on all of these different stories, so things about biodiversity and climate change and all of these things, because the more you do it, the more you talk about it, and the more you give people actionable advice and actionable things that they can do. It's not just telling the doom and gloom story, it's also giving people the call to action.
Yeah.
And how do you do that, and how do you keep doing that? But also by what we do across our value chain, how I talk to suppliers versus how we interact with our clients and our customers and our business customers and our domestic customers. It's all of that. It's just making it more normalised. So we took plastic out, right? So now when you get a Skybox, it will come in a completely recycled packaging. It's that kind of thing to make it more commercialized and make it easier and make it more noticeable. And then you start to notice when you go to other countries that there's so much plastic everywhere, so much single-use plastic, and people just throwing things away, and how we are different in this and in our day-to-day life. But
yeah, because Gemma, the ethos at WeAre8, there's a lot on sustainability. As a newer player, I guess you get to set your own rules when you first start, rather than having to retrospectively change things. And one part of that stance is whether you work with certain companies who aren't committed to sustainability. Why make that decision? How difficult is that decision? Because I'm sure when you're adding up the numbers at the end of the month, there is the temptation to think, well, they would have given us some money.
I think that's a big question. There's a lot of grey areas. I think there's some obvious ones like fossil fuel companies. We wouldn't work with them on the basis. You have to pick up any newspaper or read any reports to show their impact is huge, and that doesn't seem to be moving fast enough in the direction of renewable energy. So we wouldn't be working with them. Then you've got your social impact companies who start out with their ethos to do good, and they're starting out with that ethos, then their message and everything is very clear in the story they tell and their purpose. I think the bit in the middle is the big corporates who do have big impacts, but the impacts they have, if they were to make positive change, that positive change is bigger than all the smaller companies put together. So we have to all work together, and we can't say we won't work with certain big organizations because of their size or the fact that they've got so much more to do, because this will all drive the progress we need. I also think the content is a really important piece here, because the content on WeAre8 is very much around, we had Nike who came on and talked about the mental health awareness work they do within the black community. Santander has put an ad through with regards to the work they do with Twinkle and teaching children about budgeting and finance moving forward. Packed Coffee talk about their supply chain and the things that they do, within their supply chain to give a fair wage to the farmers the cocoa beans, the coffee beans. I think the main thing there is a lot of people have fed back and said, we didn't know these organisations did half the things they do because of all the noise and the messaging.
It's exactly as you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Education piece, and then that's telling that story with the societal commitment that you don't hear about. And then, we have, because our ads are decoupled from our feed, people choose to watch those ads. And just by having, your ad budget with WeAre8, you are doing good, because we share our revenue. So for every £1 spent, 50% goes to the people watching the ads, 5% goes to the creators, and 5% goes to a charity to support causes you care about. So the whole ecosystem is just beautifully put together, but you can tell, because your audience are more engaged, you can tell that different story, and we need to start telling different stories. It can't be about buying, because we have to reduce our unhealthy relationship with consumption. So, you get to do that through that mechanism, which is why it's so great.
You've had the opportunity to build that from the ground up, which is very, very handy. Less things to have to retrospectively go back and change. We will go on to some questions in just a moment. But my last question, I suppose, for all of you would be, what advice for broadcasters, media companies looking to achieve net zero? What advice and guidance and what learns do you have that you'd like to pass on? Whoever wishes to go first.
Do you want to go and then I'll...
Well, I mean, we're working a lot together, actually. Sky and BBC are actively collaborating. The more you can... you can't do this on your own, would be the first thing. So definitely look to collaborate and, work with either peers in your industry, or you can even talk to people in other sectors as well to see and learn from what they're doing. My advice, I think a lot of the broadcasters already started on this journey. Certainly the ones that I'm interacting with, the big ones, are already... I mean, Sky actually led the charge on this, I'll be honest with you. And, ITV and BBC have been sort of following up in their footsteps. So it's, and it's a good challenge. We challenge each other. It's good to have a bit of peer pressure, to be honest, about who's doing what.
Bit of healthy media.
And there is a bit of healthy competition. It's like, we are big, we are the BBC. What can we do? It's the same with Sky. I mean, I meet Pat's boss, Fiona, and we talk about this. But it's better when we come together, actually, because we're not competing on this issue. We all need to work together and collaborate with industry. So the other piece of advice is just get started. Don't get caught up with the perfect and how much is this going to cost, or just get going. You will figure it out. And also, it's incredibly empowering for people in the organisation. So you notice a real shift. I was in an office in Bristol yesterday, and it was a great green building. It was exemplary, actually. It's very high standards, whatever, and it was just the energy in the room around this topic is really motivating, and people want to work in organisations that totally get this, and that are authentic about it, to be honest with you, and are doing, and the transparency point. Just get started, get moving, take advice where you need to. Don't be scared of it. A lot of it brings business benefit, by the way. I don't see as much cost. I often get asked, what's the cost of this, Danielle? And all I can see at the moment is upside, and that's genuinely the truth, in terms of talent acquisition, in terms of the actual real cost of implementing net zero. We are seeing enormous benefit as well. So if you're not sending hundreds of people out to sites doing, old school production, you do save money.
Might have to disappoint someone not getting to go to the World Cup, though.
Maybe. But yeah, sorry,
Exactly what Danielle said, I think, but also just from a more kind of, I think, I'm in procurement, so we're looking at how we operationalise all of this, but we've got colleagues across our business who are actively working on this. So we all work together, we're all very engaged and energised to do this. But I think it's absolutely get started. There's a lot of help out there. I think larger companies should be leading the charge. We've got the resources to do so. And I think thinking about it from a numbers perspective, I am in cost. That is my bread and butter, right? That's what I'm measured on. But using this agenda is to make those choices that actually maybe will cost a little bit more to do this, but here is a value behind it. And the more that we invest in these new ideas, new suppliers, new packaging, everything that we do has created a market for something that then has a better positive change to enable a supplier, for example, to sell that on. If we push an agenda and work together in all of the different aspects of our supply chain, so working with fellow broadcasters, where we work with production companies or studios, I didn't even talk about Sky Studios Elstree and the new studio that we're building and all the work we're doing there to make that one of the greenest studios in the world. But, putting solar panels on things, how do we work on power purchase agreements? How do we work on how circular economy in TV? There's so many things that we could all do, but the more that we're all doing it, we all have to work together. I think I go to procurement events and it's all about Amazon and their carbon footprint, because it comes in our scope 3. So I will leave the one thing that I'll say is if we all focus on our scope 1 and 2, it solves everybody else's scope 3. So if we could all start to do that would be great. So we work just with our broadcasting peers, also with our network and technology peers, and we're working in all those different bits that Sky are in to really drive that forward. But we want to start it. We're here to help. We want to share that. That's why we're here. We want to help smaller companies and other companies that may not have the resources to do that. That's what we want to do, and that's where we want to act to be that change maker.
Well, in terms of sharing, time is a little bit against us, but if we can get to the audience, if there's any questions, if we just go just on the side here first, and we'll get through as many as we possibly can. If we can keep these relatively punchy, it would be appreciated.
Hi. Yeah, just great. On the content side of things, I was wondering, we all work in the sustainability space and we find it a minefield. Is there any plans to maybe create a sustainability literacy or hierarchy to help communicate the greatest forms of action to the general public? I have many conversations at work on what is the most impactful thing I can do. For instance, my pension divulging from fossil fuels is 27 times more impactful than being vegan. Is there any plans from any of the broadcasters to say, great, this is what we can do, these are your low-hanging fruit, and this is the big stuff that you can be working on in the background?
Yeah, I mean, look, I got sent a really good report, which I actually shared with the rest of the broadcasters last week. There's quite a lot of research coming into this area. We are working cross-industry on this, is how do we optimise the impact that we have in a consistent way and ideally measure it. Yeah, get to a point. It's quite hard, I'll be honest with you. And I've done quite a bit of impact measurement in other sectors, and it is quite hard because it's like, can one piece of content change someone's mind or change their behaviour? There's a lot of variables out there. So if somebody watches BBC News, sees a piece of content around Pakistan, for example, and the flooding that we've got there, is that enough to make them sort of think differently about their consumer choices when they go to the supermarket, for example, and what they're buying and stuff, and make that connection, join the dots truly between climate change and their individual behaviour. I do also think a little bit that we put a lot of pressure on the individual, and obviously there's lots of things that we can all do. We can all think about, we're in an energy crisis, we can all think about our homes, how we heat them, and try and purchase green energy where it's available. We can all optimise the energy that we use. We can all think about the consumer choices that we make. Do we really need to buy it? Can we recycle it? Can we get something sort of second hand? And I think there is a lot of that information out there. It is confusing for people, isn't it? Though, because you almost might just get hit. And sometimes when you're a consumer, it's too late. You know what I mean? You're there in the supermarket, you're buying something, it's already wrapped in plastic, you've got no visibility on the supply chain to get that product to the supermarket or the shop that you're buying it from. So I think we do need to sort of stop just focusing on the end consumer, although we all have a role, and actually sort of push this up to, okay, businesses need to be more transparent about where these products are coming from and their supply chains that sit behind it, and also holding governments to account. And what they're doing. We'll see that come out, I think, in COP27. But there was a really good report, so I don't know how I'll share it around, but it basically segments the UK British public and then gives practical advice on how to, for those seven segments, how you can communicate with those 7 segments, what motivates them, what their touch points are, and how you can, the theory of change effectively with those 7 segments. So if you're interested in that, I thought it was a pretty good read. Happy to share that around.
Okay. I'm afraid, apologies, there were some other questions, but we are out of time now. But thank you ever so much. Thank you to Danielle, to Gemma, and to Pat. It's been a really interesting discussion. Thank you very much indeed.